You are listening to the Critical Mass Radio Show, Orange County's business talk show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Hello and welcome to the longest running business talk show in Orange County, and I am your host, Rick Franzi. We have a great show planned for you today. Why do you ask? Because David Romanoff, who is president and founder of WISE Logistics, is our featured guest. David, welcome to the program.
It's good to be here, buddy.
So let's get started with your origin story. You're a serial entrepreneur, but let's talk about your original motivation and the inspiration to start WISE Logistics.
Sure. This really goes back almost 2 decades now. I've been a career real estate broker for close to almost 30 years now, 26 years. And during my tenure of owning a brokerage in Chicago, I had an idiot light bulb moment where I decided I was going to launch a moving company. And it was very successful, that moving company, which was my first foray into actual logistics and the movement of goods. And during my tenure of ownership in the moving company, I started to realize there were a lot of technological inefficiencies going on within the industry. And I created a software called MoveLogic Pro, which I successfully launched several years ago to service the moving and storage industry. And the whole motivation with that company was to help small and medium and even enterprise level businesses to just be more efficient, not only with their time and energy, but also with their spending. And just their approach to business, just to optimize the businesses so they performed at a much higher level. And fast forward a few years, my now business partner, Alex Dovgall, he owns a fairly large trucking company in Chicago as well. And he was creating similar type solutions for his industry, which is the movement of freight goods, like trucking. And we came together and we launched WISE Logistics. And we've developed an ecosystem of logistics and supply chain and transportation type solutions to, I would say at the most basic level, put a whole bunch of WD-40 on our transportation industry and the connectivity within the supply chain. And that's the easiest way for me to describe it.
Sure. And
now we've created, I would say, a constellation of solutions that allow us to engage not only the transportation industry, but the movement of goods throughout the entire supply chain. In total, and it's a beautiful ecosystem that really gets the community involved and all the actors involved, and it's really quite symphonic at its best. It's really awesome.
So we'll talk a little bit more about who do you serve, what problems do you solve. But before we get there, I'm just wondering, since you've launched WISE Logistics, any major or minor pivots in the business model or the service and delivery?
Sure. I think with any startup, you go for broke and you have an idea of how you want it or you envision it rolling out. But as the ideas grow and as the business grows, you take an idea and then you create a business out of that. And then if you're lucky, you're able to launch that business and then scale that business, which are 3 unique different business scenarios. So, we've definitely had a few different idea pivots in our growth model, and just with regards to all of our grandiose ideas and how we want to deliver our ecosystem. I think the greatest pivots were on what is going to be the most value add to launch our ecosystem, and what sort of timeline. And for the sake of being a business, is not what's going to have the most value add to the community, but also what's going to generate the most amount of revenue in the shortest amount of time, so we can scale appropriately. So
right. So let's talk about WISE Logistics then, and maybe you could go a little deeper on who do you help? What's the niche? What's the problem you're solving, and why are people choosing your solution?
Sure. So I think before we answer that question, which I'll get into, we got to talk about the supply chain in general. It's been operating in a very archaic sort of manner since the early 50s, effectively. There's a lot of companies that don't have a lot of uniformity. And, I think the metric is there's over 90% of the trucking companies in America have less than 7 trucks. And which means that these small businesses don't have the funding in place to deploy big boy software solutions, which don't give them access to the right data and the loads. And that's creating a huge amount of inefficiency with regards to the connectivity for payments and paperwork, but also having access to the jobs. And so we're seeing a lot of inefficiencies across the board with connectivity. And there's trucks driving all over this country, all over the world, really, with less than full truckloads or empty truckloads. And that's, for the sake of just fuel efficiency or just time efficiency or just efficiency in general, it's really, really not a good scenario. And so our solution, Wise Logistics, its root level, it was built out for the transportation industry in the United States, or North America is our lowest hanging fruit. And our goal is to engage small to medium businesses and those actors within the truck drivers and whatnot, and give them the tools they need to be the most successful with the smallest point of entry cost, so we can connect all the dots. And when I was, when we look at the delivery of goods, anywhere, any store in the country, it really, the backbone of all that is the truck drivers. How are stuff getting to these stores? During COVID, for example, when we were all basically fighting over squares of Charmin bread, it's not like Charmin stopped making toilet paper. It's just that things weren't being delivered. There wasn't an incentive for these laborers to want to do their jobs. And still now, the system is intensely fragile. And it blew up once in our face during COVID. And even though things are moving now, it is at any point it can completely collapse again. So the goal with Wise Logistics is to engage the community, incentivize and acknowledge the community, the people doing the jobs, and then give the businesses within the community the right tools at the right price point to have access to big time data and the movement of goods.
So how have you found the adoption? Because you're working with 1,000 points of light, right? These smaller trucking firms with a handful of trucks. How receptive have you found them to the idea of using a platform such as yourselves?
Yes, and that's one of the big questions: is how are we going to get these old road dogs to want to use new tricks? And at the very root of that, the simplest way I could say is incentivization programs and gamification models. We've created, like I said, a whole bunch of different entry point solutions into the Wise ecosystem. So if they don't necessarily have to use a big boy enterprise level software, but they might use one of our entry point apps or this type of solution to get this, or so they have different points of entry. And then with the advent of smart contracting and blockchain type solutions in the Web3, driving our backend data transference, we're able to create incentivization programs and gamification models to get the people performing the jobs, the truck drivers, the longshoremen, the dock workers, the warehouse workers, a reason to not only show up to work, but to get them to want to do their jobs better through simple incentivization models. And we can use things like NFTs and other different methods to get verifiable metrics and immutable data, where we can effectively create a scorecard or a credit score effectively of how people are behaving with immutable data. So based on their driving behaviors, their health and physiological behaviors, their sleep metrics, and social reviews, we could create a very clear-cut and immutable data point to get analytics on how people are really performing. And then we can say, hey, you're doing really good at this, this, and this, but if you can fix this one aspect within your daily routine, you could tier up and get better incentivizations. And we want you to just show up and do your job better. And hey, we'll reward you. So there's been a huge amount of response to that. People they want to be acknowledged, first and foremost, say, hey, we see you. Mm-hmm. And B, hey, we see you, but now we want to throw you a bone. So it's going over very well.
Good. Because, as you were talking, David, I was focused mostly on the truck driver, but you mentioned a lot of other roles that sort of are related to, and probably where the need for integration comes from, because it's not just the truck driver who needs information. It's the ecosystem.
Well, let's look at a scenario like my cell phone, this phone right here. In order for it to get from Korea or Japan to a store in California, it might pass through 30 different hands. It's going to go from a warehouse on a truck to a port in a different country. It's going to go on a boat to another port, on another truck to another warehouse. So at any point in those 30 different transactions, there's companies that need to get paid. There's paperwork that needs to be transferred. And those are all connectivity points. And if at any point someone doesn't get paid or something doesn't get transferred, guess what? My phone isn't getting delivered. That's just what it is. And so we have to make sure, first and foremost, the transference of data is fluid. The transference of the payments are transparent and fluid. But then making sure that the people doing the jobs want to do their jobs effectively. So there's a million different people doing these jobs. The logistics industry is just absolutely massive. So we have to acknowledge all of them.
So in addition to working with the trucking companies, you must also need to be working with the ancillary truck organizations around them as well, is what it sounds like to me.
For sure. Yeah. So we work with the services that Wise Logistics puts out has different points of entry for different types of solutions. In addition, we also have we're rolling out, I would say right now, a very aggregated multimedia website called trucking.us, which when it gets rolled out will be the most aggregated news source for not only transportation and logistics news, all the web, the blogs and the vlogs and the industry news, but we'll also have like AP Reuters and global news and health and wellness news, and most importantly, educational tools. And when people click the education button on our platform, we'll incentivize them to take those classes. So if you're sitting at Port Los Angeles for 8 hours in your truck and there's no incentivization to be there, you can take one of our classes and we'll pay you to sit there. We'll incentivize you to be there and to take classes. Nice.
Interesting perspective. I'm wondering, maybe you've just touched on it, but when you look at your firm and the success you've had, but you look at others others in your industry who have had success in logistics, have you found a secret to success that you and others in your industry are deploying to deliver the success?
Yeah, and we get asked that all the time. There are a bunch of great technological solutions out there for the logistics industry, and it would be against my karma, but in general, to knock any of them. I think a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of money went into creating these solutions, but they're niche specific. They're creating specific solutions that solve a problem just here. They're isolated. They're not looking at the holistic picture. And it's bold, and people will say, you're crazy. Why are you trying to do this? It's just too much. But the fact of the matter is this is the logistics industry, or the supply chain industry, is the only industry or the industry that touches the global community the most intimately. Everyone on our planet is affected by the supply chain. Everyone. And I used to have this funny story I used to tell people, and I used to say, unless you rode up on a boat to some island where when you rolled up, the islanders ran out and tried to eat you. Those were the only people not affected by the supply chain. But in reality is I think they're trying to eat us because we're putting so much trash on the shores. You know what I'm saying? So those people are affected by the supply chain too, because these boats sitting off the docks are jettisoning all this junk into the ocean, which is affecting the marine life, and there's a landmass of trash in the ocean that's bigger than the size of Texas. So everyone is affected by the supply chain. So with regards to this solution, we're really at the core of it. We're trying to create solutions that are not only going to engage the logistics community, but if we could create more connectivity across the board, we could effectively drive the cost of shipping down globally, just because there'll be less friction. And people like you and myself, when we go to get things from the grocery store, maybe the price of eggs won't be $30 anymore. Maybe the price will go down exponentially just because things will be more fluid. So in the end, the real winners of all this will be Johnny Q Public, the cost of goods, because we're the ones who bear the cost of the increase in shipping,
So I wonder if you have a piece of business advice, maybe something that you received or something that you're using that you would like to pay it forward. And could you share that with our audience if you do?
Sure. So in the beginning, you said, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I actually own 4 businesses. I've got WISE Logistics. I'm the founding member and partner of a company called Haven Capital Ventures, which is a real estate investment brokerage. We buy mobile home parks, and my wife and I own a boutique in Dana Point, which is a jewelry store called Revital Exotic Jewelry. And now we have this event space in Solana Beach called the Wise Castle. And with all of those things, with all of these adventures, you know, my best advice is first and foremost to be humble about everything you do. You know, and I remember when I was much younger, one of my mentors told me, also I should say it's critical to have mentors. Mentors come in all shapes and sizes. They don't have to be older than you. I have a lot of mentors these days that are young guys that are just younger and hipper. And I got called a boomer the other day because I'm like one of the old guys. You know? I didn't know what that was. You know, not that old. But the fact of the matter is, I have a lot of younger guys that are mentoring me on like just new trends. So it's important to have mentors, but it's also very important to be humble and to listen. You don't always have to talk a lot. I'm a very good listener, and I like to assess situations before I open my mouth. And oftentimes I'll sit in a meeting and say nothing for a long time. And so when I do open my mouth, stuff of substance and relevance comes out, and there's more value added into the content I'm putting out of my mouth, because I've been known to chew on my shoe. So I think that's my greatest advice for any entrepreneur, but especially young entrepreneurs. Shut up and listen.
Pay attention. I love it.
Pay attention.
All right.
Just take the time to listen. But when I say listen, I mean really listen to people. Listen to what they got to say, and then make your assessment on how you want to respond.
Beautiful. I wonder if we could turn our attention to tomorrow. In other words, tell us about the vision that you and your partner have for your firm, David. So
everything we're doing with all of my projects, it's all about engaging the community and providing solutions for the community. So with Wise Logistics, now we're engaging not only the logistics and supply chain transportation community, but we're creating solutions that are going to be the future of what we hope will be the future of logistics. And quite frankly, we're creating solutions that may be awesome now, but will affect our children and their children, which is really what we're doing this for. And it's the same thing with Haven Cap. When we buy a mobile home community or a mobile home park, we're buying these parks so we can build communities and engage the community and create labor force or workforce housing. Everything we do is about uplifting the community. And for future thought is, I think post-COVID lockdown, people want to feel like they're part of a community and less a part of some corporate cog in a wheel. People want to be acknowledged. People want to be valued. And if we can create solutions that are engaging, but also uplifting the community, and I drive that word all the time, then I think we'll have some real value add. And our success metric, if we look, will just skyrocket through the roof, because we don't look at, even though making money is really important, we're talking with logistics, we're talking about a total addressable market in the tens of trillions of dollars. So we know we'll have financial success, but that's not how we gauge our success. Our success is how are we offering our solutions to add value to the community. And if we can do that, the financial success will be the reciprocation of that. So.
Excellent. Thank you. That's good insight and inspiring. If someone would like to connect with you, and why wouldn't they, on LinkedIn, or maybe learn more about you and your firms, where would you suggest they go online, David?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can search my name, David Romanoff, on LinkedIn, and I think there's a sequence of numbers afterwards. You can find me with wiselogistics.com. Wise is W1SE. You can find me at havencapitalventures.com. You can find me at revitalexoticjewelry.com. I'm accessible. So I'm around, and I love to talk. I do a ton of mentoring. I do a lot of life coaching or just business coaching, career coaching. I take the time to be a mentor to a lot of people, because it's important for me to give back and imbue knowledge on people, because every time I help someone, it helps me be a better version of me. So that's really critical for my growth and my success metric as well, is what can I do to engage other types of people and give them the tools they need to be very, very successful.
Well, that's a perfect way to end the interview today. I'd like to thank you, David. You're a busy person, but you gave us some of your time to share your story, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated this.
And I'd like to thank the audience. You've been a part of Orange County's longest running business talk show. David's episode was episode number 1,427 in our catalog. If you're an Orange County entrepreneur and you would like to tell your story to your peers in our audience, then reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Rick, R-I-C, Franzi, F-R-A-N-Z-I. Coincidentally, that's the same address for my website, rickfranzi.com. And until the next time we have a chance to be together, I hope all of your decisions will move your company in a positive direction.